was the last year in 2024 when my life suddenly just hit the rock bottom. And today I want to share with you what it looks like to reinvent yourself at 31, 32 years old, just like I am doing myself. What does it look like to go through the pain, to go through the whole journey, thinking to yourself that you are constantly late comparing to others, that you will never achieve whatever you have thought you one day would achieve, what it does look like. So it was in 2024, last year, that starting the year back in January 24, I was that was the month that I decided to shut down my startup, the company I had been building for almost 2 years of my life. I decided to shut down the startup with my co-founder, and so we started that whole journey. I had suddenly a big disease to also struck me down, and my long-term relationship just came to an end that year. So it was quite a rough year. So I was living with my girlfriend, and then I had to move back to an apartment, and a shared apartment with other people, move from an entire apartment to a room. I had to shut down my company, leave the startup life behind, and find a new job. And so, yeah, at the same time, like, my health got me a surprise. And so I was caught in a situation that I lost a lot of weight, and I had to go back to the gym and to eat healthier and all of that. But truth be told, 1 year and a half later, here I am today, December 25, actually. I am almost turning 33, and I'm just starting my life. I'm just reinventing myself. Over the last 18 months, I went through a big reinvention cycle, I would say. And yeah, I just want to share with you a couple of things that I have done in order, I hope that they help you actually, because I know what it looks like. I know how hard it is to have barely no clarity or direction of what to do with your life, to not be where you once thought you would be by these day and age. And yeah, like, to how to actually go through that period of your life, you're that deep, that is so hard. So what I have done, and at least it worked for me, I hope it actually does help you in some way. The first thing was to go back to basics. So I started to look back at my life, my narrative, everything that I went through, like the stuff that I've learned, the jobs that I've had, some projects that I've been involved with, either with friends or people that I've met over the internet, all of that. So I look back at my life, I look back at the story I tell myself about who I am, to actually reflect on what have I been doing, and most importantly, what am I good at? I don't know if it happened to you, but at least it happened to me back then. When I was in such a rock bottom, I was constantly questioning myself. Like, I was constantly suffering of self-doubt, I would say, not trusting myself, with very low self-esteem, not knowing what am I good, and what is my journey and my path? What am I going to do next? And so, yeah, looking back at my narrative, reflecting on who I am, what I have been up to, which sort of skills have I learned and practiced over the years, and which of those skills were transferable, that I could keep. So the first step was that, to just look back at my life, look at the narrative, the story I was telling myself, and to try to find a couple of things that I could grasp, and to actually rebuild my identity around those. The second thing was just to rethink my entire identity, and most of all, to get some distance from the facts. So what I mean by that is, when you go through such a low period in your life, it's really hard, like, you have no idea who you are, you don't know what you want, you are in an absolute chaos in terms of emotions, and nothing makes sense. You are pretty fragile, you are pretty emotionally sensitive. So I do remember that in many ways and in many moments, I had absolutely no idea of what was about to come next. All I knew was, like, I had to leave my older house where I lived with my girlfriend, get a shared apartment and a room for me to live. I also knew that I had just closed my startup, so now I had to find a job. That was the second one. And I also knew that I had to put my health, to make my health as a priority. So I just focused on these three main things, to find a new place to move and to move there, to find a stable job that was able to give me like a stable life for a couple of months so that had nothing else to think or worry about. And three, so that I could actually focus on my health, go back to the gym, eat healthier, all of that. And that's exactly what I have done back then. It was like finding that, I would say, like that floor for you to walk. It was, at least to me, pretty important. And only after I have finding that floor, or building it actually, that was when I was able to start focusing on my identity. And that was, I would say, part of the, like, oh damn, it was pretty hard, you know? Like, okay, now I have a floor. Now at least I have some stability. I was able to turn off some of the um, noisy things about not being able to stay at the home I was living at, not having the startup to build, all of that. I was able to turn off the volume of those noisy streams. But at the same time, I had no idea of who I was at the new job. Like, look at me. Like, I was at 32, moving to an apartment, to a shared apartment, to have a room. I have no car. I was broken. I had no girlfriend, no relationship. I live away from most of my friends and family. I was completely alone, going through all these shenanigans and putting my life together. I was starting a new job at a company that, if someone told me a couple of years ago that I was one day going to work there, I would laugh them out of the room. But there I was, okay, there I was. My only focus was to go to the gym, to eat healthier, to sleep well, to do my work, to, like, like, to give baby steps and to start to get my confidence back, to regain my confidence, to build myself up. That was my focus. And so the journey to rebuild my identity, which was, to be honest, like almost a year or something like that. So it wasn't something that I've done in a week or a day. It was actually like, it was quite a grind. It was pretty hard. Okay, so I found myself a therapist, someone that could guide me and help me to think, to go through the ups and lows of this emotionally heavy journey, all of that. So I prepared myself in that sense. I had the right structure. And then I started to rebuild. So the first thing that I focused, for example, was that I love business. I love the public sector and politics and the common good. I love writing. I love strategy and systems. I love a couple of these things, and acknowledging what I like and love the most, which have been part of my life for like 15 years now, it was quite useful for me to put my life story together and start rebuilding my identity. And so I do remember at the beginning working at this new job that I still work there, but back then it was a new job. I still remember writing in my notes, in my diary, something like, I can't believe that I'm working at an insurance company. Like, I used to see myself as this pretty innovative, disruptive guy who loves tech, who is constantly obsessed about Silicon Valley and San Francisco and all of that, likes to be at the edge, at the frontier of technology. At the same time, I've always been the sort of person who is constantly like engaging in different projects and mobilizing people and all of that. And suddenly, I was working at an insurance company where where people expected from me like a pretty low key kind of person. And that was pretty hard for me to manage because for many times I had no idea how to merge the stability that I was finding with the identity that I grew having and the life story that I thought I was living. And so the path kept going, and rebuilding my identity, it has been one of the hardest things I've ever done in life, because yes, when I look back, a lot of things they keep with me nowadays. So I keep them, okay? I have kept a lot of these things. But I would say that the most important thing for me when rebuilding my identity and going through this pretty hard moment over the last year and a half, it was to focus on what am I good at. Okay, so just doing stuff that I know that I'm good. And in that sense, it was pretty cool. So I was able to find for the first time a couple of clients. So in this case, B2B SaaS founders from SF, to whom I started to write. So I love writing, and I love writing like thought leadership, helping these founders with like building their narratives, explaining what their startups are about. Even VCs, I've also worked with VCs and other people. So and that was pretty useful to go back to those kind of little things that I know that I'm good at, in this case, to writing. So I started to dedicate myself while I was at the job, at my 9 to 5 full-time job. I started to dedicate myself after I had left the job. So at the end of each day, I would go home and start writing for all of these clients, some of which I still have nowadays. But I started to write more and more, and through writing, it gave me enough clarity for me to start understanding a couple of things. And the thing I think that writing and going through that journey helped me the most was, first, I was able to get some distance from the fact that I had closed my startup. So that itself for me, it was a big um, yeah, it was a big moment because everybody knows that being successful at building a startup is almost impossible. Everybody knows like the probabilities and everything like that. But at the same time, when you are going through the journey, you do not expect that you are one of those who is going to fail. And so failing at my startup, it really, it was, yeah, it was like pretty hard to me to handle the fact that I had just failed by not being able to raise the next round and to keep the dream alive. But also, as distance came, I started to look back at that event. So, and I started to realize that it was never about building a startup, you know, because to be honest, I don't necessarily like, I I don't necessarily want to be the person who shouts out over the internet saying how many millions I do have. Instead, I've always looked at building a startup as like this entrepreneurial thing that I was able to build to prove myself that I was able to do so. But most importantly, it was never about the money, it was about the journey. And so by having distance, and by letting time to pass by, I started to realize how grateful I was for the fact that I had lived the journey of like being this Portuguese dude who has an idea, catches a flight, flies to SF, raises some money, builds a startup, a company around it, such a fragile idea, you know. And I was able to do all of that in almost 2 years. I raised capital, I hired people, I built a product. I was flying back and forth from Lisbon to SF constantly. So suddenly, by letting time pass by and by having that distance, I was able to get perspective and to be grateful for the entire journey I just went by. And just a fun fact is, a couple of months ago, so right now in 2025, just a few months ago, back at the full-time job I have, so a lot of people started to notice that I'm super entrepreneurial. So I do love to pick up stuff and just build stuff and like move on with stuff. And suddenly I now have a pretty solid and good position at my team and everything. All of that just due to the journey that I went through, you know, like I slept on the floor. I slept on like mattresses on the floor, on couches of other people's houses in SF. Like I went through a lot. So yes, like presenting a deck to an executive level of like directors is not such a big thing, you know, when you put life in perspective. So it was pretty cool to start having that distance. The second thing was like, by writing, I started to understand that one of the core traits that has always been there to me was communication. So since I'm pretty young, that I am completely passionate about the power of narratives and the power of ideas, the ability of someone to to communicate so well, so to be so articulate that they can actually mobilize people into doing something. They call people to action. I've always been passionate about that. I've studied like people from JFK to Martin Luther King, like all those big names and big people who have changed countries and mobilized hundreds, thousands, or millions of people across the globe. I'm completely passionate about the power of story, the power of narrative, and with all of that, the power of communication. And so by writing to all these founders, I started to notice and realize like a core thing that I'm pretty good at. It just seems so. And that was perhaps the thing that going through the whole journey of rebuilding my identity became vital to me, which was to realize that I'm really good at like listening to someone, understanding what they are trying to say, and to help them find clarity around the story or the narrative they are trying to tell the world. And so, yeah, like the whole work I've done with founders helped me understand that about myself. And I would say it was perhaps the biggest moment on about like the whole thing of rebuilding my identity. A few months forward, I decided to, for example, to go to Norway and then to go to Berlin to spend a month and a half studying filmmaking, to studying like script writing, how to move a camera, how to think, how to tell a story, all of that. And all of that just came through the writing that I was providing as a service for all these leaders. Um, and it was really amazing because I've always been passionate about communication and stories and narratives, but I've never had the opportunity to actually help someone to do so. And by going through such a hard period of my life, I was able to find a couple of people who actually found that super valuable. And with that, I was able to make extra cash, and with that cash, reinvest that cash and go to Berlin and Norway to study filmmaking for a summer. So it was really cool in that sense. And yeah, just to share with you how big that was, that finding. And nowadays, we are in December 25. The year is almost closing now. And I've been going through like this whole identity journey or identity reinvention journey for perhaps 18 months now. And it's pretty amazing because I now feel that I'm getting there. I am now currently in December evaluating the fact that perhaps in 2026, next year, I may move to Japan or Singapore or even Berlin or central of Europe, something like that, just to like keep building on my dreams, keep building at the intersection of like communication and tech and business and the public sector and something here. And so what I really want to share is like going through these hard times is pretty hard. And so, yes, you have a friend here who not only understands you and resonates with you, but who has gone through that. I would say I'm still going through that period. Um, and hey, I know how hard it is, okay? But trust me, there's something better on the other side, okay? And yeah, I just want to reflect on two more things. And the first thing is like, I would say the hardest part of like feeling lost at 30 is that the whole life or the whole society builds this huge expectation that by 30 you should have like finish university, got a job, find someone, structure a life, perhaps marry, perhaps have children, and you should have your whole life figured out by 30. And to be honest, like when I was back in SF, I do remember meeting people who by 30, they were already like millionaires and stuff like that. They had built products and scaled companies and they had like hundreds of employees and all of that. And so to me, it was even harder because I was comparing myself to those people who I had actually met. So it wasn't just someone on YouTube or something like that. It was actually people that I called friends. And so, but what I can tell you is like, during my whole crisis, I went back to those people to make them questions. I made them realize how lost I was, how confusing everything was. And all of them told me barely the same thing, which was like, this is the journey, okay? And so having everything figured out by 30 years old is not only crazy, But that's the path that a lot of people seek just because they don't seek for anything else. And so I quite made peace with the fact that by 30 or 31 in my case, I didn't had my life that much figured out. I quite enjoyed that nowadays because like first life isn't a linear path. Life is like ups and downs, you know? And second, because like if I am supposed to live up to 70 or 75 or 80 years old, I don't know if I want to have everything settled by 30, because it leaves barely no room for other stuff to happen, to life to happen to you. And that is something that nowadays I find quite enjoyable. Back then it was like a lot of stress. Back then it was like, yeah, I don't know. I don't want that. I just want some certainty. But yeah, nowadays I look and I'm like, yeah, I'm quite happy for that. I'm quite happy that at 32, almost turning 33, I am with such like so much energy. I am so happy. I have such clarity nowadays of what I want next. And not next in the next 10 years, but next like in the next 3 to 6 months. And it's pretty awesome. It's really great to have endured all of that journey, to be here now, so happy, so realized. Like now I have a new girlfriend. I couldn't be happier. Yes, I still live at a shared apartment, but it's quite nice actually to live with other people in some sense. So yeah, at my job, yes, I keep having the same job that isn't aligned with the sort of identity that I want to myself, but at the same time, it's like it's quite cool, because I have learned so much. I've been able to actually deploy artificial intelligence and technology to improve efficiency on the company and to see results. I've been involved once more in politics by doing a podcast throughout the entire year. So I've done so much in the last year just by trying and to like to give space for life to happen, and just by acting out of gut and out of instinct to go after what I actually enjoy. And so what I yeah like I just want to share that with you because I think like life and society puts so much pressure nowadays on top of all of us to have everything figured out by 30. um, and I must confess, I'm not that sort of person. I'm not the sort of person who wants to have everything figured out by 30. I used to be that person. I used to be the sort of person who would like, yeah, it would kick me down if I hadn't. But yeah, it just happens because like life is such a great thing in terms of you being able to experiment and like have different experiences and to actually be able to choose. So I do remember looking back at my 20s. I do remember back at a university and such, to think to think about my life. I was perhaps 16, 17 years old the first time that I planned my life, and the plan I had for my life was like, okay, in my 20s, I want to work for others so that I can understand what working means and what good work means. That's why I went to PwC and then Deloitte, and then started to build my own startup and went to SF instead of staying in Portugal to actually build and alongside with the best. And I do remember that back then it was to me something like, okay, so in the 20s, I'm going to learn. In the 30s, I'm starting to build. On my 40s, I'll be scaling. On my 50s, I'll be exiting. On my 60s, I'll go back to politics. Boom. What a good plan, right? Like, let's be honest. I'm not sure if that's a plan. I do know that's some sort of direction. And to this day, I still go back to that original plan or direction, to be honest. But it's pretty amazing to see, like, how naive that plan actually was, and in many ways how much I was able to actually go through that. So during my 20s I worked at PwC and Deloitte and I built my startup and all of that. Now in my 30s I am actually like building this YouTube channel. I'm building my own side business by writing for thought leaders or writing thought leadership for VCs and founders and all of that. And so yeah, in some way I'm getting there, but at the same time I look back and I can't laugh enough by thinking that 15 to 16 years old me would have everything figured out in his head, like everything so well constructed. So yeah, it's pretty amazing how stupid sometimes we can be actually. So yeah, and so just to wrap up today, I really want to give you a big shout out to let you know that despite the fact that you may be lost, look back at your narrative. Try to rebuild your identity. Start doing things like start doing and experimenting with things that you actually like or that you used to like. Go back to those. Build solid habits. Habits. Go back to the gym. Start eating healthier. Find some solid ground where you can walk, like a stable job if you don't have one. All of that, like give yourself give yourself time to go through such a hard time. And most importantly, I would also say, and this is really recent, I even had to hire a coach just to be able to do so, which was to have my YouTube channel. So I hired a coach, in this case James Lim. You can also find him on YouTube, and I've hired his services a couple of months ago. It was in September, October, something like that. And it was exactly to help me find the clarity on the direction I was feeling that I needed. Back then I was like, okay, I've been going through all this mess through the last year. Now I need to start doing something, whatever. And he actually helped me. He helped me like find that clarity, structure that direction that I was looking for. And so the last advice is like, if you need so, like just hire someone, find a therapist, find a coach, and try to build something, because having this YouTube channel for many people is quite terrible or pretty hard to expose yourself, record yourself on camera, publish videos. I know it is. I went through that myself. I am going through that right now. But at the same time, like having something that you can build and look up to week on week or day by day is quite great, because it gives you not only consistency and discipline, okay, but all of those are like results. What it actually gives you is structure. Okay, you can focus on outputs, which is like to just publish something or to do certain task with a certain period or frequency, and you just focus on that. And so and life goes through, and you don't think much about other stuff. You stop overthinking. You get out of your own head. And now suddenly you have a project that you want to like see it grow. Okay, so yes, that is perhaps one of the best advices I could also share, which is like try to build something, focus on having habits, or go your like yeah, enroll on some martial arts if that's the case. Try to have a challenge with friends about who reads most books, whatever, I don't know, but try to engage in something that you can see compounding and you can actually build it into something bigger. That would be perhaps the last thing I would share with you about what is coming. So yeah, where am I on my journey, right? I mean, yeah, that's a big question. So on one end, I'm pretty satisfied with the journey so far. On one end, I'm pretty grateful. I keep writing on my diary. I have a girlfriend that I completely love. I am like a good friends with the people that I live with in my apartment. I now have a small side hustle business. I now have my YouTube channel, and I am also applying for jobs and for master degrees in the center of Europe and in Asia. So yeah, a lot is going on at the moment in my life. And so I'm not sure where everything will end up. That's like for the rest of my life. But at the same time, I can tell you, when I look back to last year, oh damn, it was fucking hard. It was hard. It was pretty dark, so dark, When I look back, it was so dark in so many ways. Yeah, like, yeah. So, yeah, just keep on doing it. Have faith, not in God necessarily, but have faith in yourself, in the people around you, that tomorrow will be better, okay? And someday you will be closer of whatever you have once dreamed for you. So that's something that I hold dear, which is that the future ahead of me will be brighter than my past. So yeah, that's one of my core values. So yeah, today on this video, this is what I wanted to share with you. If you are currently going through an immense struggle, if you are going through like this big rut, reinventing yourself at 30 years old, feeling that you are behind, feeling that your life isn't what it was supposed to be or what you had as an expectation, just keep on doing. Just keep grinding. Just keep walking, because tomorrow it will be better than yesterday. Okay? So have fun and subscribe to the channel, by the way. And I hope to see you on the next one. Bye.